We will now move on to the next section of our discussion. To begin with our fifth session of the day, I would like to respect the chairpersons to unmute the mic and switch on your camera, starting with Dr. Satyam Deka, Dr. Shashi Nath Jha, Dr. Santosh Singh Patel, and Dr. Satish Agrahara. I would also like to invite our speakers. Over to the chairperson.
Good afternoon.
Can I invite Dr. Sangeet Mittal, who's the moderator for the session? Sangeet is a renowned retinal surgeon in Punjab and works at Three Eye Hospital. Brilliant surgeon, brilliant videos. His videos are lovely because he's a good surgeon. Sangeet, please take over, introduce the chairperson, then we start after that. Dr. Sangeet Mittal,
thank you, Saurabh, for making me a part of this symposium, and a very important topic, cataract surgery in a patient with macular problem. So, and since we are already delayed by the first session, I would request the first speaker, Dr. Sangamitra, if he is ready with his screen, to share his screen, and he'll be speaking on retinal vein occlusion.
No, sorry, Sangeet. Can you please introduce your chairpersons? Then Dr. Sangamitra, ma'am, can I ask you to hold on for a second? Sangeet, can you introduce your chairpersons? Or shall I do it?
Yeah, sure.
Dr. Satyam Deka is again a VR surgeon in Guwahati. He is currently with the ASG group and has been prior to that at the Shankardev Nethralaya for years. Has done some astronomy work earlier, and Satyam again is a good friend of mine. Professor S.N. Jha is one of our senior most practicing retinal surgeons in Delhi. Sir is part of Gangaram Hospital, professor over there, and renowned retinal surgeon in Delhi. Professor Santosh Patel is here with us also. Dr. Satish Gutti is from Hyderabad and has his own center over there. We'll go ahead with Dr. Sangamitra Karungo, please. Sangamitra practices, please, at Karai Vision Eye Center. She does good work at Bhubaneswar at Karai Hospital. Dr. Sangamitra, please go ahead.
Ma'am, please unmute yourself.
We can see your slide, put on and unmute yourself, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. We can see your slide also.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thanks for the kind introduction. Good afternoon to the chairman, the moderator, and the panelists. I would be talking about cataracts with retinal vein occlusions. So we would be discussing on what should we watch out in the anterior segment examination. Is fundus evaluation important? What if the fundus picture is hazy? The role of FFA and angiosity, and role of intravitreals. So as we all know, cataract surgery, after cataract surgery, there's increased arachidonic and prostaglandin secretions due to the activation of the cyclooxygenase and the lipooxygenase pathway, which increases the vascular permeability, thus leading to increased cystoid macular edema. Now, abnormalities in the superficial and deep capillary plexus were common in retinal vein occlusion patients. Thus, patients with RVO could be more prone to the development of macular edema when compared to the counterparts without a retinal vein occlusion. So what do we see in the anterior segment, and why is anterior segment evaluation that important? In the anterior segment evaluation, first we should look for the pupillary reaction. This gives us a clue towards the optic nerve functioning. Should look for NVI, increase the magnification of your slit lamp, look into the pupillary margin for thin frilly vessels, and always check the intraocular pressure, because patients with glaucoma are more prone to develop RVOs. In the fundus evaluation, a dilated tortuous vessels with hemorrhages in all quadrants with disc hyperemia, soft exudates, and macular edema points towards CRVO, whereas the dilated tortuous vessels with the above features in one quadrant would point towards the branch retinal vein occlusion. Both might be associated with vitreous hemorrhages. So let us go into some of the cases. Then this patient presented to us for cataract surgery. She was a 55-year-old female, known hypertensive for 10 years with a defective vision for 1 year. Best corrected visual acuity in the left eye was 6/24. On dilated fundus evaluation, we saw that there was seeding of the inferotemporal quadrant vessels with some hemorrhages and probable areas of new vascularization. So when an angio-OCT was done, it clearly showed that there was macular ischemia with enlargement of the foveal avascular zone with CNP areas and new vessels. So the patient was injected with anti-VEGF and was called for review without doing a cataract surgery. My second patient was a 68-year-old female, known diabetic and hypertensive for the past 12 years, defective vision for past 6 months with intraocular pressures of 18 millimeters of mercury, best corrected visual acuity of 6/60. On fundus examination, there was hemorrhages in almost all the quadrants with seeding of the vessels, which probably pointed out towards a old central retinal vein occlusion. And there were some anastomosing vessels also found over the disc, which also pointed out towards the chronicity of the disease. Now, OCT showed chronic macular edema because there was loss of septae in the macular area region, and the outer retinal layers were deranged. So this pointed out that even though we would give a treatment, the patient would not gain back much of the vision and might require number of injections. When angio-OCT was done, it showed that there was increased foveal avascular zone both in the superficial and in the deep plexus, and this also pointed out towards a macular ischemia. So the patient was given injection but was explained about the prognosis of the disease and then was taken up for the surgery. Now this was a 75-year-old female, known hypertensive for 10 years, and with treatment for open angle glaucoma on prostaglandin inhibitors, the intraocular pressure were controlled with a grade 3 nucleus sclerosis with best corrected visual acuity of counting fingers. Dilated fundus examination, though, was very hazy. We could see some amount of hemorrhages here and there. When the OCT was done, it showed a huge amount of macular edema. So this patient was injected with anti-VEGF injections, but after anti-VEGF injection, there was a traction over the foveal area. So this patient was taken up for surgery, cataract surgery, along with vitrectomy. Now, the role of anti-VEGFs in RVO is well found in the literature. The risk of post-surgical CME and uncomplicated cataract surgery was 30 times higher if the operated eye had a history of RVO, and this risk persisted even in eyes without preoperative macular edema. Patients with cataract who are actively managed for macular edema due to RVO with anti-VEGF do good after cataract. My next patient was a 72-year-old male, known diabetic hypertensive for 10 years, had a stroke 3 months back. Intraocular pressures were normal, had a grade 3 nuclear sclerosis with a lot of hemorrhages. There was a huge macular edema seen in the posterior pole. This patient was injected with dexamethasone implant, and dexamethasone implant has been widely used for RVO patients. With phacoemulsification IL implantation, it appears to be safe and effective procedure for treating patients with concurrent macular edema and cataract. And there was significant improvement of BCVA and central macular thickness after surgery. So my take-home message would be a thorough examination of both anterior and posterior segment is essential before cataract surgery to prognosticate the disease, to explain visual prognosis to the patient post-cataract surgery, avoid steroids in patients with glaucoma, avoid anti-VEGF injections with recent history of stroke or take a cardiological clearance, and OCTs should be included for all preoperative evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sanghmitra. Saurabh, what is the pattern? Either we go for the discussion now or later?
I think, Sanjay, you can start discussing which cases, no?
For this case, I think we should.
Here now, and maybe 1-2 questions. Saurabh, do you agree with me? One presentation, let it be finished first.
Yeah. So I think, Dr. Satyan, you have any comments on this?
Yeah, so let me ask one thing, Dr. Sangha.
You are not audible.
Is it? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now you are audible. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now it is fine.
Yeah. So anyway, you are trying to give a glimpse that whenever there is BRVO or CRVO or any retinal problem, before doing cataract surgery, we have to be very careful. Now, let me tell you, the cases, most of the patients, whenever they come for a cataract surgery, these patients actually they are not that much concerned about the posterior segment problem. So before going for any cataract surgery, first you have to make them convinced that you have, apart from cataract, there are some other problems, and we have to address that first. In cases wherever you can take a fundus photo or you can take a clear OCT, then you have to discuss with this patient, this is your problem, and cataract surgery may not help you even after the operation. So you have to make the patient convinced that first, then go ahead with your posterior segment treatment. And whenever patient feels that yes, I also want my cataract surgery to be done, knowing all these prognostic status, then only you go ahead with the cataract surgery. That is my suggestion.
Sangeet, can we have the discussion and questions at the end of everything? The last 20 minutes we have over there, because somebody might not be able to speak otherwise.
Okay. So then we go on to our next talk.
Okay.
And that talk is by Dr. Somnath Chakravarti. Dr. Somnath Chakravarti is ex-AP Retina at Arvind Eye Hospital, Coimbatore. And he is the Director, Retina Institute in Siliguri, West Bengal. Dr. Somnath, if you are ready, share your screen.
Yeah, good afternoon. I will just request the technical team to start.
Satyen, please mute yourself. Satyen Deka, please mute yourself. Go ahead.
The technical team actually have my pre-recorded presentation. They can just start the video. Hello, or I will probably do it from the next.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. I
Yeah, please. Yeah, sure.
In this presentation, we discuss how a cataract surgeon should approach a patient of cataract with epiretinal membrane. How common is this situation? Well, it is quite common. For the incidence of ERM increases with age, and it can be seen in 1 out of every 5% beyond 65 years of age. How do ERMs behave normally? Left alone, the overall risk of progression for ERM is low. The risk is lower for those with a normal foveal contour. At this stage, a cataract surgeon therefore can think that why bother about something that doesn't progress while planning a cataract surgery? Well, there are two reasons why we will like to advise against such an approach. The first reason is cataract surgery itself can accelerate worsening of an ERM. Without cataract surgery, 60% of ERMs remain stable, but after cataract surgery, 64% tend to progress. And this worsening tends to happen within few months of the cataract surgery. Secondly, presence of an ERM increases the risk of post-cataract CME. In a series where patients who underwent cataract surgery in the presence or absence of ERM were compared, it was found that the risk of CME was 5 times higher in patients with pre-existing ERM. Therefore, it is very important that we detect any ERM before doing a cataract surgery and counsel the patients accordingly, or else we may end up with an unhappy patient. So how can a cataract surgeon ensure that he picks up all epiretinal membranes preoperatively? Regarding clinics, we should be very alert while taking history, and if the patient complains of distorted vision, we should suspect that there is something more than just a cataract. While evaluating clinically, look for subtle signs of an ERM like cellophane maculopathy, wrinkling of ILM, or even a pseudohole. However, just doing clinical examination may not pick up all ERMs. Pre-cataract clinical evaluation alone could not detect an ERM in 87% of cases. Adding an OCT, however, ensured that all cases were picked up. Studies have also shown that in eyes with cataract that appear to have a normal macula on clinical evaluation, chances of finding an ERM on SD-OCT ranges from 2.2 to 11%. Therefore, I recommend that the cataract surgeon does a screening OCT in all patients he plans to do a cataract surgery preoperatively, if possible. So say you have now done all the necessary tests and you have a patient who has a cataract with an ERM. What should you do next? Do you refer all these patients to a VR surgeon? Ideally, you should. For your retina friend can then counsel the patients and prepare him or her for any possible visual surprises in the post-cataract surgery time period. This, however, I accept is an ideal situation, and it may not be possible for a cataract surgeon to refer each and every cataract patient with an ERM. In that scenario, remember, epiretinal membranes are broadly classified into two categories: those without foveal contraction. These will be patients who will have no tenting, distortion or thickening of the central fovea or foveola, and will also have a normal junctional complex. In such cases, a cataract surgeon can plan cataract surgery alone. However, the patient must be kept on close monitoring post-op to look for any possible progression. The other group are ERMs with foveal contraction. For example, these three cases where you can see that there has been a loss of foveal contour, the fovea is thickened, there is gross cystoid macular edema, and even a pseudo hole. In such patients, one must plan cataract surgery along with a vitreoretinal surgery. For if we allow these kind of foveal contraction to persist, it can lead to damage of RPE cells and photoreceptors. So, to conclude, please look out for an ERM during pre-cataract evaluation. If you find a patient of cataract with an ERM, counsel. If your patient has an ERM without foveal contraction, you can go ahead and do a cataract surgery. However, remember that the patient will require close long-term post-op monitoring. However, if the patient has an ERM which is associated with foveal contraction, it is advisable to plan a combined surgery. Thank
you.
Thank you, Dr. Somnath, for this talk. And as we'll have discussion in the end, now I'll invite Dr. Raja Rami Reddy. He'll be giving a talk on very important point, that is diabetic edema and cataract surgery. So Dr. Raja Rami Reddy, he is founder, medical director and chief retina surgeon at Neo Retina Eye Care Institute, Hyderabad. Yeah, Dr. Raja, please can start your presentation.
Please unmute yourself. Please start your camera, ma'am. Hello.
Yes.
Raja Rami, please start your camera and please should unmute yourself. Raja Rami, sir.
Yes, I'm listening. Yeah. I would like to thank AOS for giving me this opportunity and thank Dr. Sangeet for your kind introduction. I'll be talking about this cataract and diabetic macular edema, two most important causes of blindness in the country, coexisting, and how do we go about managing these cases. Before I proceed with the talk, I'd like to briefly review this article that's published in BJO, which talks about the rate of development of diabetic macular edema in patients with cataracts. It's basically a multi-center national diabetic retinopathy database study with anonymous data extraction done from 19 centers. And inclusion criteria, they included all eyes undergoing cataract surgery in patients with diabetes with no history of diabetic macular edema prior to start. Data had to be recorded for 4 years, 2 years prior to surgery and 2 years post-surgery. The main outcome measure was the rate of development of first episode of treatment requiring DME in relation to timing of cataract surgery. And they realized the rate of treatment requiring diabetic macular edema increased sharply after surgery, peaking in the 3 to 6 months period after the cataract. That means that when you have to do a cataract surgery of well control, this is the period that you should look out for any recurrence of macular edema. And the rate of development of macular edema depends on the pre-existing severity of diabetic retinopathy. Like in no diabetic retinopathy, there was 1% increase following cataract surgery. In mild, moderate, it is almost double from 2.6 to 5 and 10. Surprisingly, PDR, they found that PDR diabetic edema, they did not worsen. The diabetic macular edema did not worsen. Okay, now, during co-management of cataract and diabetic macular edema, importances of good preoperative assessment, diabetic control, and then treatment of macular edema, cataract. This is how the flow of the talk will be. So, most importantly is the grading of the cataract and diabetic macular edema. The extent, location of the opacity as well as central of the total, and also severity of the retinopathy. Apart from diabetic macular edema, the peripheral retina, whether there is any proliferative component, and relative subjectively, it's important that we know the relative contribution of each of the causes. I mean, the treatment decisions are sometimes very dependent on what is the relative contribution of each of this cataract and diabetic macular edema. If patient has significant cataract and macular edema, we would choose to treat one way, and the cataract is not so significant, we would choose to treat a different way with a different molecule. And this is the diabetic macular edema can present in different complexities, simple center involving diabetic macular edema, or it can have a proliferative diabetic retinopathy component. We should look carefully. Grading, that's what I said, grading is very important in detailed retinal evaluation of the retinal periphery with impact ophthalmoscopy, or if you have a wide field fundus photography, that's a very good tool. And OCT and OCT angio are very important to give a prognosticate with the biomarkers available regarding the visual recovery. And also it's good to do, and we make sure that we do, especially in combined cataract and vitrectomy, undilated evaluation to look for any early NVI or NVA. So, and importantly, it's not all about central foveal thickness. I mean, for macular edema, so should some thick retinas see well, and some thin retinas with no macular edema see poorly. So it's good to understand the OCT and pick up some biomarkers so that anti-segment surgeon also can counsel regarding this. So importantly, is disorganization of retinal inner layers. You can see that there is in the screen on the right-hand side, there is disorganization of retinal layers and failure to identify the boundaries of GCL, IPL, and inner nuclear layers. And the extent of drill, as we call it, disorganized retinal inner layers, correlates to the worst visual acuity. And and the studies have shown, and even OCT angio studies have shown, that the disorganization of retinal inner layers correlate with the amount of macular ischemia, is more so the deep capillary plexus. So if you see a drill, you can expect there is a macular ischemia and prognosticate accordingly to the patient. And also, it's good to have a look at the outer retinal hyperreflective lines that you see. Any disruption in the external limiting membrane ellipsoid zone indicates that chronicity. And even if there is a marked reduction in the macular edema, I should be careful that you still give a guarded prognosis to these kind of patients. And lastly, important to pick up vitreoretinal interface abnormalities, and it will be better to do a combined surgery if there is a significant cataract, and not try any intravitreal injection that could add burden to the patient, also will not give any benefit to the patient. And OCT angio, if you have an access, this is a good tool, especially the deep capillary plexus assessment. Studies have shown that if there is greater ischemia in the deep capillary plexus, or the microorganisms are more in the deep capillary plexus, they may be less like, they are likely to be resistant to VEGF treatment, and probably you can choose the different. Importance of metabolic control. This picture shows in a 6-month gap how a tight control of hypertensive retinopathy and diabetic mixed retinopathy with macular edema. Good control results in resolution of macular edema. This is what probably we should offer to all our patients, especially coexisting retinopathy, that you aim for a better, not only blood sugar control, but also a glycosylated hemoglobin control. Is insist on a better control of that before undertaking a cataract surgery. This is again with a tight metabolic control, you can see the reversal of the retinopathy. And focal laser, it still has a role, especially non-center involving diabetic macular edema, classically CSME as we call it. It's good to do a focal laser in these patients before for all CSME, and wait for a 6 weeks to 8 weeks before you plan for a cataract surgery. And especially when regards to lasers in cataract surgery, sometimes the yellow laser is a wonderful tool because of there is less scatter and better penetration, and safely do in all cataract size, the PRP, especially if there's a proliferative component. This is an example where there's a significant cataract and there's a vein occlusion. You can see new vessels in the periphery. Traditionally, it will be difficult to do in a green laser, but you could safely burn with a yellow laser. And this is what is the tricky point of center involving diabetic macular edema, which is mostly we're concerned about, where there is no proliferative component in the periphery. And cataract, so the different scenarios I'll be discussing. A cataract with a treatment naive diabetic macular edema, one should aim to bring the central foveal thickness to less than 250 microns. If it is a significant cataract and the patient is keen, or the referral doctor is keen for to do a cataract surgery, dexamethasone implant is my first choice. We'll give a dexamethasone implant and advise for cataract surgery after 4 weeks. And suppose if the patient is an established glaucoma patient on 2 or more drugs, then probably you could think of anti-VEGF injections. This is a case managed in this fashion. And this is a patient managed in such a way, dex implant followed by a cataract surgery, good resolution of macular edema. And what if this is another scenario is already you have seen, because these patients do not typically follow up with one surgeon, an ophthalmologist. And if you get a patient with a diabetic macular edema and on anti-VEGF requiring a cataract surgery, and if there is a edema more than 250 microns in this patient, it's better to plan a cataract surgery 7 to 10 days after intravitreal injection. And always good to aim for a retinal thickness of less than 250 microns before cataract surgery. And the anti-VEGFs are also good for all steroid responders and any PDR with DIAMI without any fibrous proliferation. It's a better flat. Fibrous proliferation, there is a risk of crunched retinal detachments happening. And of course, any rubiosis iridis is better to give anti-VEGF followed by laser. And cataract and high-risk PDR with DME, if there is an elevated fibrovascular proliferation, again, DEX implant would be a good thing for an advisor cataract surgery after 4 weeks, and PRP to be done up 1 month after cataract surgery. When it's a flat NV, of course, anti-VEGF can be safely given. And this is a patient managed with this is a severe NPDR with diabetic macular edema, managed with 1 injections of Eylea. Significant retinopathy is reduced. This is the time we would advise the patient to go in for a cataract surgery. Resolution of macular edema. Yeah. And regarding combining of cataract surgery with intravitreal injections, I best avoid it. Probably I've never advised or never let anybody do in because there is no typical advantage, and the post-procedure inflammation infections are difficult to investigate and treat in this kind of patients, unless the patient is very sick that he cannot even come. So the answer is typical no for combining cataract surgery with intravitreal injections. And important thing is to, while cataracts and intravitreal surgery in patients on intravitreal injections, is good to avoid pre and post-operative antibiotic drops, because antibiotic drops, because they tend to cause antibiotic resistance, and probably, God forbid, if you have a enough, it will be tricky to manage. Do not use routine antibiotic that you use for a cataract surgery as antibiotic prophylaxis, because they tend to because you need to keep them for your cataract surgery. So do not use them while giving intravitreal injections. And in cataract surgery in patients on intravitreal injections, it is anticipated a higher risk of inflammation, infection, or PCH. Yeah. Lastly, is a slide from a dear friend showing the complications of a cataract surgery post Ozurdex implant. I think I am finished with the talk.
Dr. Raja, is your talk over?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Raja, for a nice illustrative talk. Now I request Dr. V.R. Saravanan.
Excuse me, sir.
Professor and head.
Mittal sir, excuse me. We have one request in chat by Dr. Santanu Mandal. He has a presentation around 4:15 in another hall. So can we shift him early for presentation?
Okay. If it is fine, yeah. If
Yeah. Shantanu Mandal,
Yeah.
7th.
Dr. Santanu Mandal. He is consultant vitreoretina at Dishai Hospitals, and he'll be giving his talk next because he's having another talk in UVA session. So he'll be presenting on CSR patient having cataract and what to do.
Am I visible and audible?
Yeah, you're visible and audible, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, AIUS, and thank you, Dr. Shaurabh, for giving me the opportunity to present this CSR patient having cataract. What to do? What is CSR? A common cause of visual impairment in 20 to 50 years. There is accumulation of subretinal fluid. All we know that in the macula, there is accumulation of subretinal fluid, and which is associated with corticosteroid exposure, phosphodiesterase inhibitor use, obstructive sleep apnea, and type A personality. And maybe nowadays we know that in the spectrum of pachychoroid. So types of CSR that may be typical, what we commonly say, a central dome-shaped detachment of sensory retina, or atypical. It might be bullous, it might be with subretinal fibrin, it might be with exudative retinal detachment, it might be with RPE epithelial tract. How to manage? So typical natural history is spontaneous resolution, but 20% patient, there is persistent subretinal fluid. And if fluid persists more than 3 months, that needs treatment, and which termed as chronic CSCR. All we know that. And if the fluid persists more than 6 months, some degree of vision loss is inevitable. So it is plausible that the retinal degeneration which ensued from extended neurosensory detachment could cause permanent vision loss unresponsive to current treatment modalities. Early diagnosis of CSR as well as appropriate timely treatment are important in preventing degenerative changes and optimizing visual outcome. So this is a patient. This patient had choroiditis earlier, and the patient developed and CSR. So the steroid stopped earlier, but there is multifocal leakages noticed, and this is chronic CSR, and there is intraretinal cystic changes, subretinal fluid, and there is fibrin. So what we did, we put green laser, and this is the outcome. So if this patient develop cataract, how to manage? This type of patient, we need to see his or her visual potential before cataract surgery. Why? We need, what we need is an OCT before cataract surgery to know that the status of the fovea. And if the cataract is much more, then we need old prescription to know what is the past vision before that cataract sets in. That is a good hint of the post-operative outcome. Retinal acuity meter, wherever possible, whenever available, can guide us what is the most probable outcome after cataract surgery. Good preoperative counseling. This is 1 to 10. I would suggest that good preoperative counseling is mandatory in this patient, because all the patients have the expectation that after cataract surgery I can see fine, but preoperatively, if we counsel this patient, okay, see, your retina is damaged and you can see well after cataract surgery, but not that as much as you expected. That is very good for post-operative, any odd behavior from the patients and happy patients, for happy patients. And if possible, avoid cataract surgery in presence of fluid. So this is one of my patient with the CSR from 2017. Then how to manage? A good phacosurgery can give maximum visual outcome. All we know that. Surgery should be minimally traumatic. Minimum postoperative steroid or no steroid. Minimum postoperative steroid or no steroid if possible. Topical NSAID instead of steroid. And postoperative OCT to check any new accumulation of fluid. So this is my patient with bilateral CSR in atypical type and with RP epithelial tract. And this is his OCT in 2017 till she follows up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mandal. I think this talk is going to generate more questions, but I hope you join us later for the discussion.
After I finish, Somshila is calling. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. So now we move on to Dr. V.R. Saravanan.
Thank you, Sangeet sir. Are you able to see my slides?
Yeah, we are seeing your slides. So Dr. Saravanan, as we all know, is professor and head of retina unit at Arvind Eye Hospital, Coimbatore. So he'll be presenting on cataract surgery and vitreomacular traction.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah, the main thing is when cataract surgeons are operating for cataract surgery in the preoperative examination, they are feeling that the amount of cataract is not corresponding to the checked vision, best corrected visual acuity. Then obviously, and the fundus is looking more or less normal, you're not able to visualize anything significant pathological in the pathology in the macula. And obviously, slit lamp examination only is not enough. You need to do a optical coherence tomography also. So a lot of most of the cataract surgeons have included optical coherence tomography as a routine part of their cataract workup. Even in the absence of any significant doubt in the vision or in the macular changes. So probably in the days to come, this will be the routine as part of a routine cataract workup. So what this vitreomacular traction is as an aging process or because of other pathological conditions like myopia or inflammation and other things, when the vitreous cortex shrinks, it is separate from the retina. An incomplete separation with attachments at the posterior pole can lead to tractional forces generating anatomical damage to the posterior pole, that's the macula. The International Vitreomacular Traction Study Group, they have defined vitreomacular adhesion as a scenario where there is incomplete separation within the 3 millimeters of the fovea. It's an arbitrary measurement, but it's not causing any tractional effects on the surface of the retina. Then it's called as vitreomacular adhesion. It can be either focal when it is less than 1 disc area, and when it's more than 1 disc area, it is called broad-based vitreomacular adhesion. There is no tractional effect, vision is totally normal in this scenario. But when you have a tractional component, then it can lead to early surface changes in the surface layers of the fovea. It can lead to in the intraretinal pseudocyst. It can lead to outer or inner lamellar hole or a full thickness macular hole. So all these things can happen. So when you have a coexisting diseases, both of the macula as well as a cataract, then you have confusion on which to address first or whether to address both entities as the same sitting. When you have very significant cataract, like in the left picture we see, where you're not able to exactly assess the impact of the macular pathology on vision. You're able to pick up a mild changes in the OCT dull images, but you're not able to exactly assess, then you can always first do cataract surgery. But when you have a little bit less intense cataract, like a grade 1 nuclear sclerosis or grade 2 nuclear sclerosis, which you should be able to get corrected by a refractive correction, and you're having improper recovery of viscous vision still is subnormal, then you have a confusion. Like in these cases, if you do the cataract first, the patient is usually very much disappointed with the postoperative visual recovery. So first, if you consider vitreomacular traction, what are the treatment options? When there is no significant changes in the visual acuity or there's no history of symptoms of distortion, then it's obviously observation. There's no drop in the vision and there is no history of distortion, then you can always observe. But any of these symptoms is present, then the option is usually vitrectomy. But other options we can consider right now, Jetria is not available in India, oculoplasmin injection. And people have also tried pneumatic retina vitreolysis, where they inject a small bubble of air in the vitreous to disturb the vitreous and separate the incomplete separated vitreous in the posterior pole. But again, it has got its own complications there. Sometimes it can lead to a full thickness macular hole, or it can lead to peripheral retinal tears. It's not a very safe or very much choice of treatment. So usually the best choice, most predictable outcome is with the vitrectomy surgery. So just showing some videos of what we do with the cases referred to us. This is the case of vitreomacular traction, the foveal cyst. Here we are just breaking the hyaloid with a sharp bent needle and then trying to make these vitreous into a surrounding island at the fovea. So here we didn't want to break the foveal cyst, and then we just trimmed off into a separate island and allowing the retina to settle after that. So you can see that the OCT is now, the traction is relieved, and now the retina is settling. After 2-3 months, it will come down to more or less normal configuration. This is again a diabetic retinopathy with the vitreomacular cyst. You can see here. So in this case, when I'm trying to make it an island and try to remove the vitreous, it was not coming off, and I think I produced a small iatrogenic tear. So then we had to progress to go ahead and do an internal limiting membrane peeling to address the iatrogenic macular hole here. So in this case, you can see that the vitreous, the ERM, everything is into a single complex, and as and there you can see the thickened vitreous here, and you do the vitrectomy and induce the elevation of the parietal component, and then the needle itself you can just strip it off with and there's no injury to the macula. So this is what we do once the case is referred. You can see the image showing the recovery of the intraocular post-operatively. One thing is parietal membrane and the lamellar hole epithelial proliferation. This is the pre-operative picture. You can see the epithelial proliferation here, and this is the post-operative picture showing the ILM peeling and the stuffed up LHEP proliferative material into the lamellar hole. So this is the algorithm in the Western countries where they have occuplasm, but in India we have only surgery. We don't have pneumatic vitreous, also not very much popular here. So if you have a cataract which is mild and you feel that this should come to 6/6 with a refractive correction, then cataract is very mild. You can go for directly vitrectomy only. But you have a significant amount of cataract and there's macular pathology, you feel that is a responsibility of vision drop, you can always go with a phaco with combined vitrectomies in a single sitting. But if you have a very dense cataract where you're not able to assess what is causing the vision loss, you do the phaco first and then recheck the vision and then go ahead with your vitrectomy if it is needed. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Saravanan, for this. I think it's again a very tricky question, which to operate first in these type of patients, cataract or VR, because many of the patients will have a good vision despite having this vitreomacular traction, even which may, even if you don't operate, they do have some good vision. We'll discuss about this later. I think we move on to our next talk, and that is why Dr. Ashish Vaidya. He'll be speaking on lamellar macular holes and cataract surgery.
Thank you, Sangeet. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Now we can see your slides also.
Yeah. So thank you for inviting me here. My talk for today.
Sorry, sir.
Dr. Ashish Vaidya,
please put in slideshow, sir.
Dr.
Yes,
Ashish Vaidya is a ER surgeon at Netra Retina and Laser Center in Mumbai, and he's also consultant at Leelavati Hospital, Mumbai. Dr. Ashish, please.
Thank you, Sangeet. My talk for today is going to be cataract and lamellar macular hole. Most of this has become very simple because of the previous two talks, so I'm going to focus on a little different aspect of it. When you see a patient, you should have a high index of suspicion, and at any time, if there's a mismatch between the cataract and the visual acuity, then you should suspect a macular or optic nerve pathology. Sometimes the patients may complain of central scotoma or metamorphopsia. Ideally, you should do a slit lamp biomicroscopy with a non-contact or a contact lens, and the Vasquez-Allen test should be performed. However, in today's era of OCT, this has taken a complete backseat. Now, OCT for lamellar macular holes is an evolving concept. And here you see one of the patients in this study. The patient had a lamellar macular hole, which then progressed to a full thickness macular hole, and then the patient was operated. But most of the cases of lamellar macular holes tend to remain the same for a long period of time, and surgery for lamellar macular holes has a variable outcome and is generally not advocated. So how do we tackle cataract with lamellar macular hole, or rather with a macular hole which is going to require surgery? Let's see. So first thing is you assess the degree of macular hole. If there is progressive vision loss accompanied by worsening of the hole, as you saw in the previous case. However, as I said, lamellar macular holes do not progress. Full thickness holes have to be operated. You have to rule out parafoveal telangiectasia, diabetic macular edema, and choroidal neovascular membrane as other causes. You assess the degree of cataract. This is specifically regarding 2 points. Does the cataract need surgery if there was no hole? And is visualization good enough for an ILM peel? You may be able to see the retina, but is it good enough for you to do an ILM peel is what you need to assess. So there are 3 options which are there. You can do cataract surgery first and then macular surgery. This is done if there's a very advanced cataract and there's a doubt about the status of the hole. In lamellar holes, just the cataract surgery would improve the vision. And sometimes some patients are unwilling for retinal surgery because they have heard a lot of things and they want to do only cataract surgery, see how it goes, and then decide about the macular surgery. Here you can see this patient. He had a very mild cataract, vision at up to 6/12. And if you see very carefully here an outer lamellar hole over here. So this is the outer lamellar hole. Patient did not need anything, just needed observation, and that was it. Patient had been told that you need to undergo phaco with vitrectomy for the macular hole. This patient did not need anything, just observation. Here you have a second patient. Again, patient had been told you need to undergo phaco with the retinal surgery. We did not do retinal surgery. This was 2017. And today's picture in 2020 over here also shows that the ERM and the lamellar macular hole is at the same status and the vision is maintained at 6, 9, and 6. So not all of these patients do require surgery just because there's a lamellar macular hole. What about single sitting cataract and macular surgery? It is essential if the ILM peel cannot be done. It reduces surgical time. It gives a faster visual rehabilitation. However, wound chances increase with prone positioning. You have monetary issues over here because the patient has to spend for 2 surgeries. And there can also be insurance issues because very often the insurance makes a mess of when you do the 2 surgeries together. They just label it as cataract surgery over here in India and the patient gets a very minimal reimbursement for it. There's also an ethical dilemma in this because your anterior segment colleague has referred this patient to you with minimal or no cataract with a macular hole, and you do a cataract with a macular hole surgery. Ideally, you should be sending the patient back to him for doing the cataract surgery. So this is the ethical dilemma which we need to solve. So if you're doing combined surgery, you do the cataract first. You have to avoid corneal edema, any procedures that involve meiosis. So you should, at the end, you should leave a well-dilated pupil. Any air bubbles in the viscoelastic. Hence, you should never use methylcellulose in these patients. Always use only sodium hyaluronate. Multifocal IOLs are a strict no-no, and you should ensure good watertight closure of the wounds. In combined surgery, in the post-op period, one has to be careful for wound leaks because of the prone positioning. There's always more inflammation. Sometimes there's a small streak of blood on the corneal endothelium. The IOL may get displaced because the air bubble may press it, and dilatation may not be possible in the initial phase because you don't want the IOL to get displaced. However, multiple studies do not show any increase in hole closure or complications with either of the two. You can do it either combined or vitrectomy first and cataract later. Now you go to the other aspect, macular surgery first and cataract later. This is only if ILM peel is possible. Patient is not willing for cataract surgery and head down positioning is safer in these patients with less chance of wound leak. Also, there's a better accuracy of biometry. Monetary or insurance issues we already discussed. In a secondary surgery, there could be zonular compromise, there could be macular edema which can open up the hole, and a posterior capsular plaque. So sequential cataract surgery is always more difficult, and it is in a vitrectomized eye. In these patients, the nuclear cataract is often seen with a dense brown nucleus. There can be zonular compromise, anterior chamber fluctuations, lack of vitreous support, and higher chances of fluid misdirection. You always have a posterior plaque, which you either need to cut the opacity with the cutter at the same time or do a post-operative YAG, but always inform the patient that this will delay visual rehabilitation. So here you can see this patient. He had a lamellar macular hole which progressed to a full thickness, and in the other eye we have a lamellar macular hole which we are just observing. Again, another patient over here, lamellar macular hole which needed surgery at this point, operated, and patient did well. So to conclude, macular pathology needs immediate attention. Cataract first if the hole does not need immediate surgery. Combined if cataract allows an ILM peel. Cataract at a later date in younger patients. However, it is surgical discretion for combined or cataract later in most patients. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashish. And I think we'll move on to the next talk, and that talk is by Dr. Sonal Jadhav. Dr. Sonal Jadhav, she is Medical Director, Vitreoretina at Panorama Eye Clinic, Mumbai, and Honorary Retina Consultant at Soham Eye Care and Oculoplasty Center, Mumbai. Dr. Sonal, please.
Yes, sir. Can you see my presentation, sir?
Yeah, please put on slideshow, ma'am.
Yeah, I actually put it on, but just a minute, sir. Yeah. Can you see the presentation, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Yes,
All right.
please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you so much, All India Society and Dr. Saurav for making me a part of this interesting retina subspecialty day. We are discussing a very premium topic today, that is cataract, and with the advance in cataract surgeries and the premium IOLs that we are putting for our patients, let's not miss out subtle retinal conditions which can be the cause of loss of vision, and so much that we have to guarantee to our patients. So I'm going to talk about a very simple condition which has got very subtle signs, but it can cause definitely a loss of central vision or metamorphopsia. MACTEL2 or parafoveal telangiectasia is an acquired vascular disorder of the macula, primarily involving the degeneration and loss of Muller cells. It was initially known as idiopathic juxtafoveal telangiectasia by Dr. Januzzi, but today with OCTA and OCT, it has changed the paradigm for us to diagnose this condition in even its absolute subtle form. As we go ahead to know what MACTEL is, just a moment. Not able to go ahead. Yes, we know that's a bilateral hereditary disease, unknown cause, occurring in the age of about 40 to 50 years, with alterations in the macular capillary network and neurosensory atrophy, manifest mainly temporal to the fovea. Multiple signs that are seen in these patients from its initial subtle stages to the late stages. I'll be discussing all these signs while I'm showing the pictures of these patients with different form and different stages. But we must understand that when we have a patient of cataract, a fundus evaluation on slit lamp biomicroscopy, fundoscopy, if required, an angiography, OCT, and OCTA today are important investigations if we pick up something on the retina. Yes, if the cataract is dense, it's difficult at times to see the slit lamp biomicroscopy and fundoscopy, and their OCT stands a very, very important role. But if the cataract is grade 2, then we can pick up these signs. Coming to MACTEL, if we see stage 1, on a fundus evaluation, we may just see a loss of the foveolar reflex, like a little blunting. OCT may show us a small enlargement of the foveal pit and sometimes these void cystic spaces. And on OCTA, you see just an early dilated capillary in the deep plexus. As we go ahead into stage 2, you classically get a grayish discoloration at the fovea with crystalline deposits, sometimes which are seen just parafovea, temporal to the fovea. On the OCT, there is loss of retinal tissue, classically because of degeneration of the Muller cells. And on OCTA, we classically see these dilated capillaries, now not only in the deep plexus, but also in the superficial plexus. Go back to stage 3 from here, and here the patient now presents with a typical pigment plaque, which is temporal to the fovea on fundus examination. On the OCT, we see ischemia of the photoreceptor layer with a break in the ISOS junction, and thereby diffusion of the RPE, causing an RPE plaque or hyperplasia. And this is also seen on OCTA as an RPE atrophy and abdominal vessels which now merge with the atrophic areas. As we go to stage 4, we realize that in some of these patients on fundus evaluation, around the RPE plaque, we see a small foveal cyst, which can at times mimic a lamellar macular hole. On OCT, we see hyperintensities all through the RPE layer, as the vessels migrate towards the RPE. And now in OCTA, we see that multiple abdominal vessels are migrating all around and merging with the choriocapillaries true. As we go to the last stage, which is stage 5 and the complicated stage of MACTEL2, patients in this case present with a classic CNVM subfoveal. On OCT, there is a classic type 2 subfoveal CNVM, but these CNVMs present with not much of subfoveal fluid. And on OCTA, you classically see a vascular net. So these are different stages. As we go from stage 1 to stage 5, yes, stage 1 and 2 are very subtle changes, and it's difficult to pick up these changes when we are seeing patients with dense cataracts. But in cataracts which grade 2, at least we can pick up these fundus stages. But as cataract goes advanced, OCT becomes a must in almost all our patients. This was another patient which presented like an early lamellar hole, but as soon as the OCT was done, we diagnosed it to be a parafoveal typical type 2A. So recent advances in cataract surgery have led to excellent outcomes, rapid recovery, and increased patient expectations. Utilization of premium multifocal IOLs reduce contrast sensitivity and increase our patient expectations, which makes thus the presence of any retinal thickness potentially very significant. In conclusion, and a take-home message is a very careful pre-op examination. Keep subtle retinal conditions in mind, which are difficult when we are seeing patients with cataract. And every time that a patient comes with cataract, the loss of vision may not only be because of the cataract, but be because of such conditions existing on the retina. OCT is a must in all premium IOL patients. Counseling again is an extremely important thing, and on the choice of intraocular lens is very important in view of pre-existing retinal condition, and a guarded visual prognosis should be given to all our patients with a pre-existing retinal condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sonal. And you have raised another important question about the use of multifocal IOLs in patients with macular diseases.
Yes.
I'll discuss that later on.
Yes.
Now we'll pass on to our next speaker, who is Dr. Neeraj Sanduja. Dr. Neeraj Sanduja is Director, Vian Eye Retina Center in Gurgaon, and he'll be speaking again on a very important topic, that is the presence of CNVM along with cataract. Dr. Neeraj, please go ahead. Your screen is visible.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sangeet and Dr. Saurav for giving this opportunity. My topic is cataract surgery in a patient with CNVM. And whenever the patient of CNVM with cataract comes to you, you have some questions to answer to yourself and to the patient, whether the cataract surgery will make the age-related macular degeneration worse, or whether your cataract surgery is going to improve his vision or not, and how I'm going to counsel the patient and any special precautions I need to take. So there is this debatable issue whether the cataract surgery contributes to progression of AMD or not. There have been various studies which have shown like cataract surgery is an inflammatory process and it can lead to progression of age-related macular degeneration. But certain studies like Blue Mountains Eye study showed that there was no significant increased risk of developing AMD after cataract surgery. And even another study published in 2012 showed that most AMD patients had better visual acuity 10 years after surgery than before. But yes, the patient who had AMD, they had worse visual outcome than patients without clinical signs of AMD. So it is very important to prognosticate to the patient. But in our experience also, sometimes we have done cataract surgery and the patient, this is a patient left eye before cataract surgery, and you can see after 2 weeks after phaco, he developed CNVM. So in our clinical scenario also, we have seen very few patients who have developed from dry to wet AMD after cataract surgery, and this may be a chance only. So I think it is, you don't have to fear about like your cataract surgery will progress age-related macular degeneration. And the reasonable steps for cataract surgeon to consider in order to optimize postoperative visual acuity is, first is to make a diagnosis of CNVM. And then you have to counsel the patient. Then you have to discuss about the choice of intraocular lens, and you have to control intraocular inflammation so that whatever risk is there for the progression of AMD should be minimal. So CNVM diagnosis is based mainly on the patient's symptoms also. If patient is complaining of decreased vision with metamorphopsia or telling you like central scotoma is there, so you should look beyond cataract also. You should look at fundus thoroughly and look for any membrane which could be there, like choroidal neovascular membrane, where you see a grayish-greenish subretinal lesion with associated subretinal fluid, sometimes hard exudates, and with a definitive fibrous component also. And if you are in doubt, you can do angiography and OCT also. If you have got that facility available in your clinic, you can see CNVM is delineated over here. And OCT is a non-invasive test that should be the first line of investigation which you should do in all patients who are undergoing cataract surgery to rule out any macular problem like ERM, VMT, or CNVM also. Because in around, I would say 5 to 10% of cases, you are able to pick up some retina problem which you are not able to appreciate clinically. OCTA is also a tool that your retina colleague will be doing, but for your initial diagnosis, doing an OCT and good clinical examination will let you know whether you are dealing with CNVM or not. As far as the choices of IOL is concerned, it was told to us like yellow tinted, blue light filtering IOLs are best because they reduce absorption of low wavelength visible light and decreases chances of age-related macular degeneration. But various studies have shown that there is no definitive effect of putting these intraocular lenses, and even the patient who had clear lens or yellow lens, the progression of AMD was same. There was no difference. But yes, multifocal IOLs is a big no in these patients because already your contrast is low, and putting multifocal IOL is not going to help this patient. And these patients should be started on NSAIDs 1 week prior to surgery to decrease the chances of inflammation in the postoperative period. And in patients with mild AMD, if you're operating, you can tell the patient like he's likely to get good vision with good central visual acuity and good vision, and this is a realistic goal. But if there is central disciform scarring or geographic atrophy, then you should tell the patient very clearly that the vision will improve, more of peripheral vision, and central vision may improve to some extent. So if you're dealing with wet AMD, always counsel the patient about retinal disease and cataract both, and tell him very frankly that vision is likely to improve, or it may not improve also. It all depends how severe the retinal disease is, but cataract will let you know, cataract surgery will let you know to delineate retinal problem more clearly after cataract surgery. And if you're in doubt, always take retinal opinion, because the patient will have more faith in you if you're dealing the patient in a holistic manner and taking care of both retina and cataract part. And anti-VEGF injection should be given before cataract surgery if you're planning to do cataract surgery. And this anti-VEGF injection should be clearly explained to the patient that it needs to be repeated after 1 month. And if the cataract is dense, your retinal details are not so clear, macular details are not clear, so you should do cataract in such patients, and anti-VEGF injection can be combined with cataract surgery, or you can give 1 to 2 weeks prior to your cataract surgery also. And in the patient with visually significant cataract, AMD should not be considered a contraindication for cataract surgery. And surgery should not be delayed for fear of causing advanced AMD. And IOL selection, as we told, like all IOLs are good, and preferably acrylic lenses are good for such cases. And counseling is very important. We should educate patient and their families about behavioral aspect of the AMD management. And you should start the patient on antioxidant capsules also to decrease the chances of progression of AMD. And you tell them about smoking cessation, vitamin supplementation, and you should give them absolute grid charting for the other eye also, and need for regular fundus examination and a regular checkup. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Neeraj. You raised another point about the timing of injection before cataract surgery. We'll discuss that later. So now we move to our last talk of this session. That is by Dr. Preetham Samant, and he'll be speaking on cystoid macular edema. And Dr. Preetham Samant is retina consultant at the Eye Associate Mumbai and PD Hinduja Hospital Mumbai. He is also associate professor at Grand Medical College Mumbai, and he's one of the main organizers of this event that is being held this Retina Subspecialty Day. Dr. Preetham, I hand over the mic to you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, dear Dr. Sangeet. Thank you for the kind words. But you know, a subspecialty like this, the day could not have been complete without your involvement, Sangeet, and the involvement of all the other speakers. So I'm going to speak on pseudophakic cystoid macular edema. So what is pseudophakic cystoid macular edema, or CME? Retinal thickening of the macula due to disruption of the normal blood retinal barrier. And this causes leakage from the perifoveal retinal capillaries and accumulation of fluid, classically in the outer plexiform layer and the intercellular spaces of the retina. This is the definition of CME. And when this fluid accumulates, the visual loss occurs from retinal thickening and fluid collection, which distorts the architecture of the photoreceptors. So how will it appear to the patient? The patient classically complains of decrease in visual acuity, which is gradual and painless, loss of contrast sensitivity and color vision after cataract surgery. There may be metamorphopsia, which can be demonstrated on Amsler grid. There may be micropsia and central scotoma. Popularly known as, referred to as Irvine gas syndrome, the inflammatory, it is attributed to the inflammatory process occurring in up to 20% of the eyes post cataract extraction and IOL implantation. Only about 1% of those affected actually have clinically significant decrease in visual acuity. But if the cataract surgery has been eventful, that is, it has had complications like a PCR, then the figure can go as high as 20 to 25%. It is classically seen about 6 weeks post-operatively. And mind you, 95% of CMEs due to Irvine gas resolved spontaneously. So the clinical diagnosis is best seen on slit lamp biomicroscopy, where you can use a 90D or a 78D to look at the macula and look at the classical petaloid pattern. You can do a color fundus photography, and what it will show is the intraretinal cysts within the foveal region of the macula. So something like this, as you can see in the center, a collection of cysts in a radiating fashion. Fundus fluorescein angiography, although it is not routinely done in all cases, will show in the early phases capillary dilatation in the perifoveal region. And in the late phases, it will show what is a book picture. This is a petaloid pattern of the edema in the outer plexiform layer. And the petaloid pattern, as we all know, is because of the radiating Henle's layer in which is there in the perifoveal region. The fluorescein angiography may also show smokestack pattern, and one may also see late staining of the optic disc. But more importantly than FFA, it is the optical coherence tomography, or OCT, which plays an important role in diagnosis, follow-up, and prognosticating CME. It measures the retinal thickening and depicts the intraretinal cysts, and it may also show the coexisting vitreomacular traction or epiretinal membranes, which could be actually the etiopathological factor for the CME. One must remember other differentials. We have already seen in this particular session discussions on macular telangiectasia, X-linked juvenile retinoschisis, a macular BRVO, either a fresh or an old macular BRVO, a chronic CSR, or even a choroidal neovascular membrane like the RAP lesion. These are all pathologies which may masquerade as a post-operative pseudophakic CME. Now, this was like this, for instance. Now, this, if you just look at the OCT, it looks like a CME. In fact, this patient was referred to me because the referring surgeon had taken only a scan through the fovea. Probably had not given attention to seeing the fundus. But if you look at it, it is actually a fresh macular BRVO, which probably might have occurred 2 or 3 months post cataract surgery. And this is a macular BRVO and not a pseudophakic CME. Coming to the management, primarily the management is medical. Like I said, most of these CMEs resolve spontaneously if the cataract surgery has been uneventful. Management would depend on, of course, the underlying etiology. Like if there is an epiretinal membrane or vitreomacular traction, then that will have to be dealt with. CME is usually self-limiting, but what I prefer to start the patient is on NSAIDs. And if the CME persists, then go to steroids, injections, or surgical therapy. So topical management, ketorolac, nepafenac, and bromfenac twice or thrice a day over a period of 4 to 6 weeks is the initial line of treatment. If not responding to NSAIDs, you can along with NSAIDs, you can add steroids like prednisolone, difluprednate, or loteprednol about 3 or 4 times a day. When topicals do not work over a period of 4 to 6 weeks, then the next line of treatment would be obviously giving injections. It can be given, you can give periocular subtenance triamcinolone, which works equally well. Or if one is, is experienced with intravitreal injections, one can go with intravitreal triamcinolone or Ozurdex. Mind you, when you shift to these periocular steroids, you have to look for secondary glaucoma. So this is typically how a CME would, behave. Here you can see with topical steroid, this CME worsened. But with intravitreal steroids, you can see the same CME resolving, little bit of subretinal fluid also resolving over time. Surgery, if there are coexistent pathologies, one may need to do vitrectomy to remove the epiretinal membrane. I don't really have much experience, but there is a talk of doing Nd:YAG laser vitreolysis to relieve tractional components such as vitreous adhesions in the iris. This may help resolve the CME, or one may even resort to a triamcinolone assisted anterior vitrectomy by the limbal route to relieve the vitreous traction and hence relieve the CME. So to conclude, pseudophakic CME is an important cause of mild painless loss of vision post cataract surgery. One must look for whether cataract surgery was accompanied by PCR or vitreous loss. OCT is very important as a diagnostic tool. Mind you, CME is self-limiting and may spontaneously resolve. But if it doesn't, then it will require topical or periocular steroids, and chronic edema may cause permanent photoreceptor damage if left untreated. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Preetham. I think we have something like 20 minutes for discussion now. It's 4:41. So I thank all the speakers for their lucid presentations, and I invite now the panel. The first thing I think the whole of the panel may agree upon is, I'll ask one by one to the chairpersons about the use of multifocal IOLs. What Dr. Satyan Dekar, what would you say the use of multifocal IOLs in macular problems? I think it's a strict no for the multifocal IOLs.
When Dr. Niraj has told absolutely no in his presentation, what I have heard that he has told absolutely no for multifocal IOLs. So why the answer is that from a VR surgeon point of view? See, most of the patients who are coming with the premium IOLs, basically they want their night vision also, driving also, and contrast is essential for them. So whenever we see that there are some retinal problems, and along with that some amount of cataract, first of all we have to know whether cataract surgery is necessary or the retinal treatment is primarily necessary. But some patients, they are adamant that I want to go for the cataract surgery also. So in this aspect, whenever we see that the chance of getting visual acuity not absolute, and whereas there is the contrast sensitivity or night driving problem may be there, so we have to inform the patient that these are the points. Maybe even after the cataract surgery, if you have a retinal problem, so you may not get your all whatever you want. So multifocal, I will also agree with most of the VR surgeons in this aspect that multifocal IOL should be the last option whenever there is possibility that you will not have a good vision. But in some cases, suppose there is an epiretinal membrane or a VMT, but you know this VMT is not having much problem with the vision. The vision is cataract is only the reason for the visual problem. Even if there is some VMT, he will have 6/6 vision. In these cases, suppose if you put a multifocal IOL also, this patient is not going to have any problem. But you have to calculate the risk with the type of the patient. Some patients are okay with whatever you give. So you can give multifocal in those cases where you know that even if there is some subretinal problem, but this is not that significant, multifocal IOL, yes, you can do, but you have to be very, very careful. So to be on safer side, you avoid that. I will also agree with most of the surgeons. But it is not absolutely no.
Sangeet, we will move on. Yeah, next.
Pardon?
Next question.
Okay. So next is the role of OCT. I'll ask Dr. Santosh here. Sir, what do you think? You will do OCT in all patients who are undergoing cataract surgery, or as suggested by someone in only premium IOL patients? Or
Yes. Actually, basically, we have to work for every cataract patient, starting from the vision. So if you work for the vision with near vision and some amount of metamorphopsia and distortion of vision, so then only you can pick up the patient you have a macular pathology or not. Then you can plan OCT depending on your premium IOL patient or depending on your specialty. Like you have a medical college facility for the poor patient or subsidized patient, or you have a private practice where your patient can pay. So depends on your patient category. You can plan the OCT before cataract surgery because the patient wants the vision, and your patient is a premium IOL patient wants the clear vision. So then you can trial the patient depends on vision distortion and other things. One of most important is OCT. We can use IDO before cataract surgery. So most of our cataract surgeons using a direct ophthalmoscopy, and that in case of the hazy media, they can miss the macular pathology. They have to do indirect ophthalmoscopy, and with these symptoms, OCT help to rule out a solar eclipse photoreceptor loss also. So OCT is always useful for premium IOL patients, and if we have a facility, we have to use. Sir.
Santosh, definitely OCT is a valuable tool in guiding our management before cataract surgery. but definitely it also adds an additional financial burden to the patient if we are doing in every cataract surgery patient.
Sangeet, I have a point to make here. I think the most important thing, the majority of the cataract surgeries now, if you see, you will be able to see with a good 78 diopter slit lamp biomicroscopy, you will be able to evaluate the macula. If you find the macula is okay, I don't think it's really needed for you to go ahead and do an OCT in those patients. But if you are very suspicious about the macula, and if you feel that the macula doesn't look healthy, then at that particular point, probably you can take an OCT and then probably go ahead and come to a conclusion what to be done. Rather than probably every patient with cataract surgery going for an OCT, well, that will add a huge burden to the patient. That's my opinion.
I think I'll agree with Dr. Satish. If you have a situation where the diminution of vision is not explained, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, in a situation where you can't explain the loss of vision to the amount of cataract, I think in those situations I'll definitely do an OCT. And probably for premium IOLs, because for premium IOLs, I don't want to miss any occult macular problem like maybe a parafoveal telangiectasia or a thin ERN. Because in multifocal IOLs, you are dependent on your 3 to 4 millimeter pupil size, and your macula has to be absolutely healthy. So in those situations, I'll definitely do a OCT.
I think I agree. In all multifocal patients, multifocal IOL patients in which you are planning multifocal IOLs, an OCT should be done beforehand just to rule out any macular disease. Next, we move on to, if Dr. Jha is present, the timing of cataract surgery. Especially in patients with vitreomacular traction or lamellar macular hole, whether when will you do the cataract surgery, whether you will do vitrectomy first or whether will you do cataract surgery first. Dr. Jha, if you are present, please. I think he is not.
Can I take that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Ashish here, yeah. I think, as I said in the presentation, I do cataracts and I do retina. So when I look at a patient who has come with a cataract and macular pathology, when I'm examining the cataract on the slit lamp, the first thing I see is that, can I do a ILM peel in this patient? If I feel I can do a ILM peel in this patient, I will not push for the cataract surgery. But if I feel that the ILM peel is going to get compromised, then I would definitely advise a combined cataract and a retinal surgery approach. There are some patients who are about 60 years of age who have very, very little nuclear sclerosis also. Such patients also I would not push forward to cataract surgery, because I prefer to do the cataract surgery later on as a secondary procedure, maybe 6 months to a year to 2 years down the line, whenever the cataract actually occurs. And I feel that gives them a better sense of visual satisfaction than combining the procedures. But of course, there is a big thing for combined procedures also.
Dr. Ashish.
Thank you, Ashish.
I fully agree with Dr. Ashish that if there is a problem with your island peeling, you have to go for the cataract surgery. But sometimes the nuclear sclerosis, NS3, NS4 also, you do not have problem with the island peeling. So we have to break.
I'm sorry. Can I intervene? This is for general ophthalmologists. This is not for VR surgeons. No ILM peeling discussion here. My sincere request to all of you. So generalists, leave ILM peeling for now, sir.
So let me tell that if the cataract is significant, go ahead with the cataract first. Then
I agree with you.
Also tell that there are some retinal problems that the retinal surgeon take care of that. I think that.
Dr. Sangeet, with your permission, Subirana has asked a question. Sangeet, with your permission, comment on the use of intravitreal triamcinolone. I think it's extremely important. Half of India can't afford anything else. So, madam's question is, comment on the use of intravitreal triamcinolone. If Dr. Rajami Reddy is there, or Neeraj?
Actually, intravitreal triamcinolone I have not been using frequently. I've used Skita, suprachoroidal injection of triamcinolone, and the results have been really encouraging without any risk of glaucoma and other.
Anybody else who's using triamcinolone? Sangeet, you yourself?
Yeah, I think intravitreal triamcinolone can be given in patients who are undergoing cataract surgery if they have significant macular edema. But in some centers, I have seen the patients are given intravitreal triamcinolone even in the absence of macular edema, just anticipating that the macular edema will develop. I think that is not a right practice. If you find that there is a significant macular edema and which may progress later, you may give intravitreal triamcinolone either before surgery or at the time of surgery, or at that matter intravitreal Ozurdex also before or at the time of surgery. But I think even if you give it later on, that also serves the purpose, the same purpose. So
why not the anti-VEGF? Why not anti-VEGF rather than triamcinolone?
No, I think this question was in relation to the
For
poor
CNA.
patients, not affording patients. The question was in relation to that.
But Saurav, I've seen like giving intravitreal injection and suprachoroidal injection of triamcinolone. Suprachoroidal injection has lesser side effects than intravitreal triamcinolone.
Right. No, I'm not getting into what your preferred, what we are talking about the general practice for the lone practitioner in a small town, the guideline for them. We are talking about those people. The lone practitioner, no access to a surgeon, poor patient, 3,000 rupee package, gross edema, can't afford anything else, poor diabetes control, all those patients over here. I think
one thing we were discussing was about the vitrectomy part. One thing I'd like to pass a message to the cataract surgeons is like once a vitrectomy is done, then your cataract surgery becomes less than the routine cataract surgery. So if you are capable enough to do that cataract in a vitrectomized eyes, then only you touch that patient. Otherwise, you can refer it to some other center. So that is one more thing I should like to add on the cataract and vitrectomy part.
No, Sangeet, just to end that, if the cataract surgeon wants to operate, does not want to let go of that patient, what precautions should they take? The cataract surgeon should take in a vitrectomized eye. 1 or 2 precautions.
Yeah, there are actually many problems in that. One is the fluctuation of the AC because of the reverse lock in these patients is very common, and he has to take care of that. Another thing is the nucleus drop. The chances are high because sometimes there might be some lens touch vitrectomy that may be leading to cataract surgery. I think that is the most. Otherwise, also many problems during cataract surgery. Don't dilate properly.
Let us do the cataract surgery first, and let us do our part. Because he is going to refer in the
Here the point was in a vitrectomized eye, not to attempt cataract surgery. Yes. Sonal, you want to add something to that?
Can I add?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Then go ahead, Sonal.
No, I think as we are talking about cataract surgery in vitrectomized eyes, I think all of us know that in these cases, the fluctuations in the anterior chamber are definitely that the cataract surgeon has to keep in mind. That's extremely important. And yes, the part of the nucleus drop, which Dr. Sangeet Mittal very rightly said, because while you may have a touch that is there on the posterior capsule that is to be definitely kept in mind. I think sometimes the parameters what they are using of a higher vacuum or a higher flow rate have to be altered when you're doing, those parameters have to be taken into consideration when you're doing surgery in a vitrectomized eye. So most important, some simple points that they have to keep in mind. Considering the choice of premium IOLs that we were discussing, I think as a cataract surgeon, in very simple words, if you can see the retina, and if you feel the fovea is not the cause of your loss of vision and a patient is not in for one of those trifocal or multifocal IOLs, you can get away by not doing an OCT and not putting the burden on your patient. But yes, if you are doing 100% a trifocal lens in any patient, irrespectively whether you can see the retina or not see the retina, please do an OCT because you just want your back to be very safe. That's very important.
Very adept, very.
We'll move on to one more interesting thing that that arose in between was the timing of cataract surgery in between injections. You see, in some patients like vascular occlusions and CNVMs, you need repeated injections. So what
1 week?
What would be the 1 week, and that is in between the various injections, or first you complete the course of treatment and then you go ahead with cataract surgery?
So Mittal sir, also I think in this case, probably I feel that it also depends upon how dense is the cataract for you to treat inside. That's one thing. So if you feel that the cataract is very dense, then you can give your first injection and then ask the patient to undergo the cataract surgery. If you feel that you are able to see inside your retinal vein occlusion and you are able to treat, maybe if you do need to do laser and you're able to do it well, then you can hold on for the cataract surgery and finish your treatment first. I don't know if somebody else has to add something to it.
We have around 3 minutes. Satish, 1 second. Dr. Satish, Sangeet, if I have your permission.
Yeah, sure.
Is Dr. Satish there?
Dr. Satish, I think.
No, he's
He's left.
Yeah, here. I'm here.
Okay.
You are here.
Yeah. So, in continuation what Dr. Sangeet just asked, specific disease of, let us say, diabetic macular edema, your recommendation for cataract surgery in between anti-VEGF injections?
See, as far as in between the cataract surgeries, at least I wait for a period of 2 weeks, 1 to 2 weeks post-injection, and then you can take it up for a cataract surgery. And after the injection again, probably you'll have to reassess the patient again after 2 weeks. But you will have to understand one of the very important things, that post-cataract surgery, invariably foveal involving edema is going to get aggravated, whether you like it or you don't like it. Okay, so that is the point which has to be explained to the patient very clearly. And I just wanted to ask a question to the panel here, just to continue the talk here. If you find a patient with a reasonably significant cataract and you have a foveal involving diabetic macular edema, is there any harm in doing a cataract surgery along with an anti-VEGF injection at the same setting? Does the panel, because there are people who do cataracts with also along with the retina work. So do you recommend them? Because a lot of anterior segment surgeons know how to give intravitreal injections also. So I see them, majority of them, like if they find a foveal involving edema, or when should I inject when I'm doing a cataract surgery? Or is it a mandatory thing that we have to refer them only to a retinal surgeon and then they decide or think? So that is something, because majority of the anterior segment surgeons have got this question.
Right. So we will break up. This is the last discussion part, only 2 more minutes to go. I'll ask Sangeet first. Your take on Satish's specific point on, can I do cataract surgery and anti-VEGF same sitting first time itself? First visit patient.
First visit.
cataract छोड़ना नहीं है.
I won't actually. I don't know. I won't. I will first control the diabetic macular edema, and once it has settled down, I'll just advise him cataract.
Dr. Santosh, your opinion, sir, at your setup?
So treat the retina first, then cataract.
I love you guys.
Can I intervene?
Satyan.
See, you cannot finish treating the diabetic macular edema. It's a condition that you have to go on.
But then,
so why don't you do the cataract surgery also? If it is subtle edema, go ahead with cataract surgery.
Correct,
and then subsequently he continues.
Right. I think we'll stop this session. We'll stop this session here because you have to go to the next session where Samruddhi is already there. So the take-home message is to all our dermatologists: do OCT in the smallest doubt. Primo else do OCT. Treat retina first as much as possible, then do cataract surgery. Counseling, like all our speakers told, is very, very important. I will last comment from Sangeet, and we'll close the session. Nobody only Sangeet, please.
I think what you said was 2 things: diagnosis and prognosis. This has to be done, and that is must for every cataract surgeon. He has to diagnose the retina. He has to examine the retina at least. Many surgeons I've seen does not even examine the retina before taking up the patient for cataract surgery. He has to diagnose and then prognosticate. That these are 2 important things in a patient who has cataract and who has concurrent macular disease. I think with this, we should end this session, and because we are running short of time. Thank you, Dr. Saurabh. Thank you, chairperson, and thank you, speakers. For this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And a collective thank you to Sangeet for conducting it so well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Sangeet, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you, everybody. It's been such an